Please listen carefully.
Welcome back to the Focus Target podcast for episode 115. We've done 115 of these episodes, gentlemen. That's pretty impressive. With me, as always, Van and Shy. Gentlemen,
sir,
does it feel like we've been here before? Because today, podcasting.
Because today we're talking about doors.
Today we're talking about reincarnation.
Oh,
That's going to be our topic for the day. You guys act so surprised, like you don't know.
I thought you were going to say we were talking about deja vu or something, like based on that intro. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll get into it. We'll get into it when we get into it.
Maybe we could do deja vu too.
That's
like part of this,
because we may not have enough to talk about for the entire 1 hour.
Right.
We have a quick question of the day and a quick cleanup quarter to get to. I'm going to do the cleanup quarter first. Today's cleanup quarter. So last episode, I was trying to remember Nico Sturm's name for the Colorado Avalanche, and I couldn't, and I feel really bad about that because I like Nico Sturm. I think he's been a good addition. I think he may play an important role in the upcoming Stanley Cup Finals because we've got a number of injuries. So he hasn't been in the lineup too frequently in the postseason, but I think we may see him before the end, and I wish him a good series finals. So sorry for I'll put some spec on your name, bro. What's the 2 questions?
What's the reason that is he related to Nico Fim at all?
Based on first name?
I hope not. I hope not, for his sake.
Maybe it's one of those countries where like the surname is first.
No, there's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
I don't even know who that is. Maybe we're getting far off the trail.
He was. You would have known him from old Final Fantasy 11. He was
a red mage, I think. Who used to play with us?
Nico.
Nico.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It took me a second there too. I was just like, what? But then I got it. Anyway, so for the people who are completely lost, just don't worry about it. We're gonna move on to the question of the day. Today's
Nico Fim versus Nico Sturm.
Not gonna help you. Not gonna help you. Today's question of the day is a question. I steal a lot from the Avs podcast I listen to, so the DNVR Avalanche podcast. I'll give them a shout out. They were talking about this one day on some random off-topic thing, and what made me want to bring it up with you guys is that it's one of these questions that for some reason everybody thinks it's super obvious, but people don't always agree on which way it is. So let's get the take of the podcast today. What do you think there are more of in the entire world? Doors or wheels? Doors or wheels? If you count everything that's a door is a door, everything that's a wheel is a wheel. What are there more of in the world? I'm going to start.
So to set some ground rules real quick.
Sure. So let's get into it.
So that we're all thinking conceptually the same. So doors as in the actual door mechanic itself, something you have to push open in order to enter a way, or a doorway, which is just a vacant hole.
I don't think we would say a doorway. I think it would have to be an actual door.
Yeah, okay, door with hinges and doesn't necessarily have to have a knob. It could be a push door or
but
whatever.
But doggy
it's a door.
doors, cabinet doors, closet doors,
Yeah.
And then as far as wheels go, what is a wheel?
Wait, so hold on. We are including cabinets?
Yeah.
Well, cabinet door.
Right. Yeah, that is a door. I don't know what else you would call it, right?
Yeah, cabinet.
But how do we define wheels? I think this is the one that's more complicated when I've heard people talk about this question.
Yeah.
Like do ball bearings count as wheels? Would a pulley system count as a wheel? What is a wheel?
System, I think would.
I think so. I think anything that's kind of oval
wheel-like, if you will.
Yeah, wheel-like.
Would a gear be a wheel?
A gear? I think a gear would potentially count.
I don't think a gear would be a wheel. I think a wheel would be a wheel.
I guess because a gear is like serrated.
It has teeth and
I think it has to be round and smooth.
Wheel of cheese.
Yeah, spin. A wheel of cheese would be a wheel.
I think that'll work. Yeah,
absolutely.
What about like those factory delivery wheels things that boxes slide on? There's 800 wheels in there. Okay, I think those count too. Okay, cool.
I think those count too.
All right.
So, yeah,
I think we all have a pretty good idea now where to start.
That's where we got. All right, so now that you've kind of got the context, what do you think there are more of in the world? I'm going to start again with Shy.
Well, I mean, since I don't know. There's a way to prove this. I feel like this is very much a sense of things. I feel
Nobody's
like
asking
I would go with wheels. I feel like I don't know.
You go with wheels, and why
it's
is
so
that?
hard. It's so hard to conceptualize because there's so many of both. But
wait. Before we're influenced by his answers, why don't we give our short answer?
Okay,
wheel
good
or door,
idea.
and then start explaining.
So wheels would be my short answer.
You go with the wheels. Van?
Doors.
I gotta go with doors as well. Although I'm a little bit more swayed by wheels given our definition, because I think you could have a lot of really small wheels packed into places.
Don't talk about it yet.
Well, now we're past the short answers now, man.
Shy and let Shy explain.
No, it's like an open conversation.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's one by one, and that's it. No one's allowed to talk.
No. Let's make this a little more organic today, all right? Jump in.
My favorite kind of way to be.
Organic?
Wait.
You live in the organic lifestyle?
What?
Isn't that how you have kids? Can we go back on track, please?
Oh dear God. Yeah, I think the stuff like the factory. It's just hard. I think that you could make an argument either way because you can really get into minutia as far as like doors and wheels. I think. So I want the wheels because I think wheels look cooler than doors, and I like the concept of wheels. They move things along. But I think like you look at stuff.
The question wasn't what do you like more, wheels or doors? It's like what do you think there are more of?
It's an impossible question.
Wheels or doors?
It's an impossible question. No, I think like stuff like factories. And you think of like large scale apparatus that like operate off having moving like wheels or cylinders inside them that could be considered extended wheels, or like I think there's just so many wheels in the world that like move our world along.
All right. We'll go to Van then before I get into my rebuttal of that. What do you think, Van?
Yeah, I agree that the definition of wheels in like a factory, that has to be just an absolutely insane number, but I still maintain there are more doors. And all I think about is my personal life is how many, and I realize it's extremely anecdotal and very small sample size, but how many doors do I come in contact with daily versus how many wheels I'm on, right? So typically I take my car, we're talking 5 wheels. I guess yeah, we already talked about gears aren't, but pulleys are. Okay, now the car has a series of pulleys.
Well, think about belts, like
that's
the
what I'm
thing
saying.
That runs the belt. Like, is that a wheel?
Serpentine belts.
And
I think they would be, right? So then, so now I'm talking myself out of it. That is not a wheel?
No, I said there's a lot more gray area with the wheels for sure. Yeah. What you you probably find that the answer to this maybe changes depending on certain things being included or excluded.
Right. Yeah. But regardless, I was thinking of doors. You have a normal house, call it a 3-bedroom house. You're going to have roughly, 7 doors when you talk about garages, entryways, all that crap.
You're going to way more than that because you're not even counting all the cabinets.
You're not counting cabinets, sinks, all that stuff.
Your bathroom cabinets, yeah.
So I think of all of that, and then the mode of transportation is mostly wheels, as we talked about. And then you get to your job, where there's even more doors that you come in contact with. And unless you're working at a factory, you're going to be walking through office spaces that don't necessarily have wheels. Like maybe there's a push cart, but I don't think that's equivalent to all the doors that are going to be inside said office as well. So I just think in running scenarios through my life, I will encounter many more doors within my orbit as opposed to wheels. And that's why I came up with that answer.
Yeah, I agree. I think that just the thing that sways me is like anywhere that, like, with the exception of a couple small places like you already talked about, maybe factories, the wheels outweigh the doors, but like basically everywhere else you go.
A wheel factory, if you will.
Well, at a wheel factory, now we're getting really like that's like exponentially blowing up. Like that's highest concentration. That's where the wheels win, right? But like to your point, you go to an office building and like how many wheels are you going to find there? I'm sure you can find some, but like some of the big office buildings that have like thousands of doors, in places that I've even worked, like where it's like you've got a rows and rows of offices. Even on a floor, you've got 100 doors just in and out, not counting the cabinet, the desk drawers, some of them are drawers, those don't count, but like,
and those drawers have wheels that move them along their tracks.
That is true. You get, they come together a lot, right?
They do. And and I'm just thinking right now, like you're passing every single one of those doors, and every single one of those doors has a person who works in that office, and every single one of those persons sits in a chair that has 10 wheels on it. Like, because most of them have that split wheel thing.
Oh
like
yeah,
five spokes.
Maybe 10.
There's like 10 wheels on each chair that you're sitting on too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
This is getting crazy, man. This is getting crazy.
You see why this question kind of bothers you, because you can actually feel very confident and then flip when you remember something else. It's
now the office of a wheel factory. That is like the most wheels per capita. Like it has to be.
So if we had said wheels like vehicle wheels, I think I would have definitely gone doors.
Yeah.
I think that like it's like if you start going just talking about circular objects that move in a certain way, or, you know.
Well, I mean, what if you narrowed a wheel down to a circular object that's meant for propulsion?
Yeah.
Right. So in that case, cars, your chair wheels still count because it's about mobility and like moving, not just. So in that case, I don't know.
No, because all like in a factory, wheels I mean, and I think that is the problem. Is like that is kind of what a wheel is defined as, and
so,
it's hard.
So we could spend another 25 minutes going back and forth on wheels and doors.
Maybe we should. I don't think we probably won't be able to talk about anything else.
Here's the thing.
I thought that was the original plan. Was 30 minutes on this question and 30 minutes on the question topic. We have nothing to talk about on.
Well, I'd say let's talk about that topic, and then maybe we could circle back to the wheel conversation.
Using a door.
Well, we can step through the door.
Using a wheel.
We could reincarnate this question of the day.
Yeah, what is more? We have a lot of things we go. Yeah, we'll maybe circle back to this. But
hold on, I want to give us two definitions. The definition of a wheel.
Oh, okay.
Is a circular object that revolves on an axle and is fixed below a vehicle or other object to enable it to easily move around the ground. So that's pretty much what we said.
So that's not what we said. That's much more specific. That takes out a lot of the factory stuff.
No, it doesn't.
Those factories, like when you're talking about,
they're on an axle, right? That center bar is the axle. Okay, and then the wheels are spinning on the axle.
They're not mounted under a vehicle for the purposes of that vehicle moving around. I mean, unless you're considering
circular object that revolves on an axle. Oh yeah, and is fixed below a vehicle or other object to enable it to move easier above the ground. Okay, so yeah, I guess it is still.
I don't know if conveyor belts and belts in cars, like certainly like chair wheels. And again, then that kind of takes out cheese wheels, right? Now your cheese wheels are gone.
Yeah, is that a misnomer? I mean,
its second definition is somewhat of a circular definition, pun intended. It says a machine or structure having a wheel. How the hell is that a definition of a wheel?
What?
All right, let's look up door. Definition of a door.
So I wonder if
a hinged, sliding, or revolving barrier at the entrance to a building, room, or vehicle, or in the framework of a cupboard. So exactly as we said.
Yeah, I think we had doors nailed down pretty well.
But one thing I didn't think of is
doors.
We didn't, nor did I think about the relationship between the four doors on your car.
Well,
already negating the four wheels on your car.
More than four. If you think of like trunks and hoods and like
that's true. Yep.
Glove compartments and.
Yep.
But less when you're talking about like buses, which usually only have one door. Big rigs where you got your two doors to the cab, but then you've got
airplanes,
like 18 freaking wheels.
Senate trucks.
Airplanes have 18 wheels and typically two doors, except for the emergency doors. But I guess those would count too.
Those would count. And what about
the
lavatory?
What are those wood vehicles that kids build and race down hills where there's no doors? They just hop in them, but then like they have they have wheels. Yeah, like was it box cars? Yeah, like. What about Matchbox? What about was it Matchbox cars? The old toy cars you'd buy that didn't have they're welded shut, but they have four wheels on them.
That's true. So there's no doors. That's all wheel.
Well, now does a door have to be working to be considered a door?
Yes. Otherwise, it's not a door, right? It's just a painting.
Because I don't think we'd call I don't think we'd call a statue of a car with like wheels that don't move. They're cast in metal, as those wouldn't be wheels either.
You wouldn't still. Oh, you wouldn't. I don't know. That's a great question. Like, if it's identifiable as a wheel,
this question is so provocative.
Yeah, that's a good one. It gets the wheels turning, doesn't it?
But it's one of those typical like
the doors
like
turning?
A really good. It's It's honestly a really good interview question. Because like the answer doesn't matter. It's just how you got that process, right? What were you thinking? What was your problem solving skills and all that stuff?
Yeah. How confident are you?
Wheels make me feel better.
Yeah. You know what they say, doors make the world go round.
Van's like, I'm not hiring this guy.
We ask you a very simple yes or no. You're like
said, are there? Yeah. What do you think there's more of?
I
really like wheels.
Feelings into this. That's all right. Just good to be in touch with your feelings, Shy. It's good to have a sensitive side. All right. I've had enough of doors.
Yourself. Let's move on.
Yeah. So if you have an opinion about doors and or wheels, if you'd like to enlighten us on a subset of wheels and or doors that perhaps we have overlooked in our conversation, or just have ideas for better questions of the day that we could ask each other, hit us up after the show. We'll provide our contact information. Maybe. Were we still doing that? I forget if we decided we were going to do that or not. We talked about not doing that.
We have to now.
We have to now. If you have an opinion on whether or not we should waste a minute of our outro giving contact information, we'd love to have your opinion on that too. So, okay, let's come back to life and talk about reincarnation. So, we're gonna start before we get into broader viewpoints of the world. Do we need to define reincarnation for people? I think that's
I pulled up a definition because I feel like it's a good starting with that. So this is apparently from the Oxford Languages Dictionary, I guess. So there's the two definitions. The basic noun, it says, is the rebirth of a soul in a new body. And then the two examples it has are either a person or animal in whom a particular soul is believed to have been reborn, or the second one is a new version of something from the past. So that was the definition.
I get the first definition. That basically is what I think of when I think of reincarnation.
One's the spiritual definition. One's probably more of a colloquial definition. Like if you say, "Oh, they've reincarnated the spirit of such and such."
The Buddha or something. Like here's the Buddha's eighth.
Oh no, I thought it meant more like figuratively.
Okay, so like
Coca-Cola is now reincarnated in this new,
and they have an example sentence. It's like the latest reincarnation of the hippie look is basically what like the sample sentence they have is. Yeah, so it's more of like like you said.
All right, so what do you guys think about, just personally, if you want to share your own belief? Do you think that we are reincarnated? Do you think that you have lived previous lives, either as a previous human or as perhaps an animal, that you're unaware of? I'm going to start with Van this time. Van, what are your thoughts?
I was once a sperm, and now I am a human.
I mean, you're still a sperm. You're just all grown up.
That's true. I've just divided a few trillion times. That's a good point. Okay, so I guess I haven't changed. Yeah, cell division.
You're talking about,
like in order to make a body?
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know enough about the subject to speak intelligently, I guess.
I'll go with that. I'll go with that.
All right. So reincarnation has actually been my, I would say, longest held belief after death in my life. So I had it as young as I can remember up until I can't give you an exact date, maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and then readopted the theory again for a few years, and then I'm back on the fence on it. So my relationship with the concept of reincarnation has been all over the board, from that's really the only thing that makes sense, to the more atheist approach, which is literally nothing's going to happen, you die and that's it, back to no, I think there is something to this reincarnation stuff, to now like I have no idea, so let's talk about it, and that's why we're here.
All right, what about you, Shy?
I can't say I've ever thought that I have lived a previous life as someone else. So I guess that's where I fall.
All right. And Van, just to clarify, when you say, and I know you're not sure now, but in your previous iterations, did you believe in a species to species consistency that you always reincarnated as a person, or did you think that, hey, maybe I was a fox, maybe I was a
No, so
blade of
and I
grass?
guess let me clarify this too. I don't.
Yeah.
It's weird. I believe, or at the time, and currently again, I'm on the fence. So I'm going to sound very confusing at times when trying to describe this. But
Just another
when I held the what was that?
Go ahead.
When I held the belief strongest when I was younger, I never believed. It's weird. I never thought about that I was something before. I thought when this life moves on, it will become something again. So I don't know why, but for some reason I always thought that this was the first life.
Okay.
Or
Sure.
or not even that it was the first life, but I just never had considered that, hey, if you believe in reincarnation, then why haven't you thought that maybe there was a previous life? However, I will tell you this, that when I was younger, I was never taught this, I was never learned this, I never heard this anywhere, just intuitively for some reason, I always felt, and this is so bizarre, I always felt that any animal you killed intentionally or unintentionally or hurt or anything like that, so like burning flies with a magnifying glass, stepping on spiders, things like that, right? I'm not talking about torturing kittens or dogs or anything. Like any of those things that happen, I don't know why I believed this, but I always believed that you would come back as one of those animals and not necessarily have the same thing happen to you, but it was like highly likely or something like that. So like you sit there and you see a roach and you intentionally step on them, like you're gonna come back as a roach, and guess what? Somebody's gonna step on you, whether it was like a dog running through the forest or something like that.
So
And
basically, you believe
maybe it was like a karma thing.
Karma, yeah.
Yeah, maybe it was like a karma thing, right? But again, I was never taught that. I just intuitively believed that for some reason. I don't know where it came from. It just felt that way when I was a kid, literally burning ants, or when I would be like, "Oh, that spider scares me. I don't want to go to sleep with that spider there," and killing it.
So you believed in this, but it didn't stop you from burning the ants.
No, but it always concerned me. I was always cognizant of it when I did it.
Get this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get it one day, but I don't care right now. I'm burning these.
There's a good chance that I'm gonna feel all of this.
I'm past the point of no return.
yeah, but I'm already here. Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting. That's an interesting segue into maybe something I'd like to talk about, which is, I will start to answer the question that I don't. To say I believe in something is a little bit too strong. I wouldn't say I believe in reincarnation, but I certainly am open to could accept the idea of it happening, if that makes sense. Like, belief is too strong, but like I wouldn't say I would be like I don't believe in it, or that I know it's not the case. I've always been a little bit more agnostic about death, insofar as like, I'll know when I die, and until then nobody can truly know. Like, we can guess, but I can say I would say I think I believe, as you have already stated, Van, that like if I had to put my money down on something and say, make a bet what's going to happen after death, like I would have most confidence in saying that, like, once you're done, and that's it. And like, it's just like, you turn off your computer, it's gone. The screen is gone. Like, it's not, is it alive in the machine? Maybe that's a conversation for another podcast. But I think there's certainly a chance that reincarnation could be true. And I've always liked the idea, if you've ever read the story, and I'll have to effort this while somebody else is talking. I think it's called The Egg. But it's kind of the idea of it is that, and I think we've talked about this on the podcast before a little bit, that that all people are actually one person, and you live every life that's ever been lived on the planet, and it's your like meta spiritual development. Like, it's like you go through every possible life, you experience life from every point of view, from the good, the bad, the you're the oppressor, you're the oppressee, you're the rich man, you're the poor man, and you experience all facets of life, and it shapes you as essentially a deity. And I think there's something to that, and it kind of resonates a little bit with what you were saying, Van, about like when you're doing something to these animals, that like that one day you'll be the animal, and that somebody's doing it to you. And again, I don't know that I believe that. I think belief is too strong, but it's kind of a cool idea, a cool thought, and like you could kind of it kind of could make sense to you that like maybe early on in your early lives, you don't know better, and that's why you oppress people and you do terrible things. And then as you live more and you get oppressed and you have terrible things done to you and you experience that loss, you start to grow and mature. And then your later lives are the lives of the people who do great things in the world and are and make positive contributions because you've grown into that person. You've seen what it's like. Like I think there's definitely an appeal, like an appealing nature to that. That's like that's kind of a cool idea. Um, So like maybe I feel like that would be what I would like to have happen. Like I think that would be cool if that were true, but I don't know that I believe it, I guess.
That seems like a cool idea. I think that where that feels like it would break down is the idea that if you had billions of people following that path and they were all following that progression potentially, and I don't know if that's what the idea of the story is that all humanity is kind of like following that path.
No, the idea is that there's only
one consciousness.
You're every person. Everything that's you've ever done to anybody, you've actually done to yourself. Anything that good, bad, or otherwise. That really, we're all talking to ourselves just in three different life points, different places.
Well, it's not even that, I would say, right? I mean, I'm guessing because I think ultimately what it is that like if you're the one, it's you would be talking to me and Van are just different personifications of you, right?
We are Groot. Right, we're all we're all the same, right? Like it's just this is my Garrett playthrough. I mean, my Smiley playthrough.
And you're still interacting with like we are still individuals, and you are assigning a different like personality than yourself. Like it's still just you, though, right? I mean, like, that's where I don't. That's where you're starting to lose me, or the story kind of starts to lose me, I guess.
You have to kind of take an atemporal view of it, right? Like. Think of it like imagine if all of human history was a video game, right? And at the beginning when you're born, you select your player. Mm-hmm. And I'm playing as this playthrough of life as Smiley, and I live Smiley's life. And then when I die, game's over, and I unplug. I was like, wow, that's kind of a weird playthrough. Let me start over, and this time I'm going to play as Shy. And you experience the same, everything's the same, but now you're playing from a different point of view, right? You're playing from a different character's arc, right?
I mean, I get that. I understand. I understand what you're saying. I guess I don't understand as far as like, ultimately, is it saying that there is only like whoever you are, I am me, that is the singular consciousness in the universe, and I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's where I'm thrown for a loop a little bit. That seems like that's the point.
Yes, that that life is. Another way I've heard it described is that life is God experiencing itself, like from every possible way. If you do a search, there's actually a really cool YouTube video where they kind of did like a little like video along with it, but it is called The Egg.
The Egg.
If you just type in The Egg, and it's only like it's like a little like 5-10 minute video, cool. But I recommend it. I think it's pretty cool. Maybe that'll help. Maybe that'll help you understand a little bit.
All right, cool.
Anyway, we went on for a while with that. Go ahead, Van.
You said so. I was surprised to hear that you wouldn't completely put down the idea of reincarnation, considering what a atheist you have proclaimed to be, and then I realized that those aren't exclusive. They're absolutely not. You could certainly be an atheist, not believe in a single god or entity or anything like that, and still believe in reincarnation.
Sure. Where does God come into reincarnation, right?
Yeah. So, but I guess like you would have to have somewhat of a belief that there is something magical, for lack of a better term, about life or a soul that is persistent beyond your physical body, at the same time maintaining that it is impossible for a single god to exist at the same time.
Well, and I've never really considered myself a hard atheist, right?
Okay,
like I think a hard atheist vehemently denies the existence of God versus not necessarily believing in a God and saying,
got it. Okay. Okay.
I've always felt that, if there was some evidence that I found compelling that would tell me that there's a God, I'm open. I'm very scientifically minded, right? Like as new evidence presents itself, I'm willing to reevaluate. if Jesus returns, and gives us some good
evidence.
Good hard
real
evidence,
quick.
I'll be like, all right, we're cool. Like, I'll readjust my theory, but like the evidence provided to me thus far in life, and that could be a whole podcast, is things with like the problem of evil and things of that nature. Like, we could really get into some of that stuff, and it might be interesting, but I think it's a little bit of a different conversation.
Yeah.
Gotcha. It's just nothing that I've seen has convinced me.
Sure.
There's a God, other than potentially, if you want to talk about the definition of a God, right? Like I've always felt like I'm certainly open to like the idea of like the divine watchmaker theory, right? That like God sets the universe in motion, but then it's just like, hey, I'm just gonna kind of see how this plays out. Like there's no way to know. That certainly could be the case. Like, why not? But yeah.
All right, so I think you and I have somewhat stated our position, right?
Yeah, and
do we still need to hear from Shai?
I mean, I think I stated my position in the fact that I've never, I've never thought that I will ever come back as someone else. So like, I guess spelled out, that is, I guess I don't believe in reincarnation. And what's weird is when we read those definitions, one of the reasons I wanted to look up a definition was I wanted to know what the actual hard and fast definition of reincarnation was, because we've talked about at the afterlife before. We've done an episode on the afterlife before, and I talked about being a Christian, and part of the traditional Christian viewpoint is that when Christ returns, the dead will rise again in like a new body. And that like, so the idea would be that they would be in a new body, but I think it's not, I don't think that jives with the term of reincarnation that we're using, or the popular use of the term reincarnation. So
it would be technically reincarnation, right? But not perhaps how it's normally meant.
Yeah. So like, I think in the popular term, I don't believe in.
It's hard. I think the times that I'm most convinced is when you try to think about what it would be like to not exist. It's very kind of unsettling. It's like if you try to think about like non-existence, like it just doesn't see, like, because it's all we've ever known. Like we only know consciousness, and like it makes you think that maybe there is something more, right? That's like, am I really gonna, like, one day I'll die and then that's just it? Like, it seems, maybe because it's such an alien thought to what we've known our entire lives, it's hard to believe that could be that when you're done, you're actually done. And so it makes you wonder, like, well, what if you do come back? What if your spirit is eternal, and like this consciousness, even if I don't remember previous lives, has been, recycled, whether here or, elsewhere in the universe, in a different universe.
And then you start throwing multiverse theories in there, and it gets even that much more infinite. But you said the word unsettling, and for me personally, the thought of not existing is like the most unsettling thought for me. Like, it makes me so uncomfortable that I try. So I not unlike anybody else out here, but like if I'm really interested in something, I'll sit there and I'll think about it, I'll meditate on it, I'll really ponder it and try to get to the nitty gritty of it. And that's the only one that like physiologically makes me sick, to the point where like I can't think deep enough to continue to build and develop on theories on it. And every time I do that and I shut myself down, I always think like, now is that by design? Because logically you can figure it out, but you're just like physically, like you've been programmed, not programmed as in a computer, but like with whatever chemical imbalance or whatever happens in your brain during fear and fright and all that stuff. Like, is it because that's ingrained so much into you that you can't continue to go down this pathway? And that's like how I feel every time I start thinking about it. And it's like, ooh, am I getting close to really determining like what's possible? But it just feels so uncomfortable. I don't like to go down and have that thought experiment within myself. Like it's so bizarre. And that's the only topic that I feel that way about.
I mean, like when Smiley was just spelling that out, like, I mean, I had a physiological reaction to it, because like I think that whenever I think it's, and I don't know, and I want to generalize, but also not generalize, because I don't think that there aren't people who aren't like this, but I think that in general, humans, we don't like thinking of mortality. We don't like thinking about death. We're talking, now there might be subcultures or certain people that kind of even like, maybe build a culture around something like that, but like
Right. Yeah.
But like, I don't think that any of us want to think about not existing, because Smiley said, like, that's all. We opened our eyes as babies, and then we've viewed the world and the universe and existence through the lenses, these two lenses, our whole lives. Like, we don't have a way of unplugging ourselves from ourselves, and we don't have a way of, so like that thought of like one day your eyes will close and you will just never think again. I think especially for people, it's interesting. I don't know, who knows if we'll still be podcasting in like 30 or 40 years, but you wonder if in like 30 or 40 years, if we somehow kept this up that long, like what our viewpoints would even be like at that point, right? Because I think you hear stories of older people who are like, and I'm feel like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna feel like we're way off track now. This isn't even reincarnation anymore, but like sometimes you hear stories about older people who are like, I'm ready. Like, I've lived a full life. Like, I'm ready to move on and like have peace almost sometimes. Maybe that's based on how their life went, and like what they've seen. Like a lot of things can build into that, but or maybe that's a lie to make.
I don't think so. I think one of my favorite Harry Potter quotes is when Dumbledore says, "To the well-organized mind, death is just the next great adventure." And I really agree with that. Like I am on the record as saying that I don't fear death. And some people probably take that as just like bravado, but it's actually true. Like I'm actually like excited is probably the wrong word to use for that. Like I'm not like hoping to hasten my death.
Go to sleep.
I've got
a weird conversation with your wife after this podcast.
I know. It's just gonna be like, excuse me, what? Oh, not the right word. Like I have a wonderful life and I enjoy living it, but I am curious. Right, I want to find out. Like that's the last great unknown, and like I'm curious what happens. I want to know. Like, am I going to go burn in hell because I've lived such a sinful life? Am I going to be reincarnated as a prairie dog? Am I, am I going to, as Van said, close my eyes one day and go to sleep and just it's going to be like when you sleep, you don't. That's kind of in my personal experience what I feel like I believe, because I had a near-death experience a number of years ago where I was in a coma for over 6 days, and it was just like going to sleep. Like it's like I woke up and I was like, oh, it's been a week, and it's like I could see that being like, oh, I woke up, it's been forever, right? Like it makes sense to me that could be what it is. Like when you go to sleep, you never really know if you're going to wake up, which is kind of scary. But
what's interesting about that is, in my own personal experience, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or whatnot, for a period of 10 to 15 years, I was the same exact way. So I know what you're saying is not bravado. It's not that at all. Like literally, when I would put myself to sleep, I would think like, okay, well, you're going to sleep. If you die, honestly, it doesn't matter. You're dead. So like, you're not going to know you're dead. So it changes. It changes literally nothing when you go to sleep. And if you don't wake up, it changes nothing. And I had that thought too. And I'm like, since you don't know it, since you're never going to know it, nothing like that, then it really doesn't matter at all whatsoever. And so it wouldn't bother me. I'm like, so not only just going to sleep and dying, like I had the same thought, just living. If I walk and I keel over and I have a heart attack, like I'm going to be scared for a few seconds. And then there's going to be nothing. So what do I even care?
You don't want a long, drawn-out, painful
right. Right. Yeah.
At least I don't. But
so I know what you're talking about. I completely understand what you're talking about. What's weird is I don't feel that way anymore. Now I'm like, I want to, like, I don't feel that way anymore. Like I feel like there is fear when going to sleep, and there is hoping that you will wake up in the morning.
I imagine it's because of your family.
I know where you're going with this.
And
I've had that same question too.
Right, like you feel like you have more to lose, and like that's what I wouldn't, like I said, I'm not excited about it. Like I don't want to hasten that. Like I want to be here. I wouldn't want to like leave my family and stuff like that. Like, and just selfishly as well. Like there's a lot of that. Like I want to see how the Stormlight Archive ends, for fuck's sake. Like or some of this other stuff.
Win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah. If I die before if the Avs win a cup in a couple weeks, I keel over tomorrow. Like, how pissed I would be? Like, wait 20 years to see another cup.
Though.
Don't even make
it at all. You wouldn't be anything.
It depends, right? Depends if there's an afterlife or not, right? Like, why is this my new baby so colicky? I don't know. He can't remember, but he's mad about something.
But the last point I'll make on this kind of train we took, is that, yeah, Shy, I think the same way that you mentioned about how older people are like, okay, I'm ready, and they genuinely seem at peace, at ease, comfortable with the idea of dying and just letting it all go. And that's, I always find that fascinating too. Like, will I get to that point knowing that I was once there, I'm not there now? Like, I don't want to die, God, if you're listening. But like later on when I am older, like, will I get back to that point of peace where it's like, yeah, you know what, it really doesn't matter anymore, so let's get the herd over or whatever's going on.
Yeah. And I think sorry,
go ahead.
I think some of that just ties into like your life, like the life you lived, and like, what do you consider to have been a good life or a bad life, or do you live with regrets, or do you not live with regrets, and all, because I think there's older people that don't die peacefully. You know, they're like, they die not wanting to die, and I think we could have a podcast about death. I don't really have anything insightful to say. If I did want to, if we're throwing movie quotes about death in there, I wanted to throw one of my favorites in.
That was not a movie quote; it was a book quote.
A book. All right. Well, all right. We're talking. If we're throwing quotes about from works of fiction in there,
fair enough.
I want to throw a quote from Hook in there, and I've always loved the quote at the end when Hook is facing off against Pan, and like, you look at Hook, how they portrayed Hook in the movie Hook as this old man living in Neverland with all these boys, and he's tormented kind of by his age. He's got this giant stuffed crocodile with a clock in its mouth that's constantly reminding him about time, and he's got Peter Pan like backed up against the corner, and he's like threatening him with death, and Peter Pan's like, he's like, you're gonna die or something, and Peter Pan's like, so what? Like, death is the next great adventure, I think is about word for word what he says. And I always thought that was such a cool way to say that, right? Like, not even knowing what that entails. I think it speaks into what Smiley was saying, honestly, and I think kind of what you were saying is like, not like, we don't know. Honestly, no one can prove what death is. No one. Yeah,
all we know is nobody's come back from it.
Yeah,
right? That's all we know is nobody has come back from it. Well, again, you've got some people have made claims, and there may be people listening to this podcast.
Some people, only like billions and billions.
Now you got your mediums and stuff, and what do I know, right? Who am I to maybe when I die, I'll be a ghost, and I'll be like, well, thank God this guy can hear me, nobody else can, right? But I don't know that.
No one has come back from being permanently dead. Let's say that.
No, right? Yes, and I mean, we could discuss the account of Lazarus, but I think a lot of stuff in the Bible is very suspect. So,
but then if Jesus brought him back, was he really permanently dead?
But this isn't a podcast about like
a biblical podcast. You got a lot of great podcast idea of this one. See, these higher level podcasts always give us more ideas, whereas like the distance and the drive really don't so much. So,
right.
It's good to do
it's
these.
Like, I teabagged some dude in Battlefield.
Played more Battlefield. Okay, giving EA your money.
Right.
Let's do another podcast about Final Fantasy 11. That's a great idea.
God.
All right. Well, so we've talked about a couple things. There's something on the on our outline that I wanted to ask about because I don't know what whoever put it here meant about it. But there's something here about infinite time / universe.
Yeah.
What's that about?
I'll talk about that because I put that. And before we move on, I just wanted to make a couple points. We've touched on a lot of things. So I don't know if you guys have heard the term secular Buddhism. I know you know what secular means and of course what Buddhism is, but there's like this huge movement today in secular Buddhism where they consider the Buddha, who lived approximately 200 BC, I think it was, so 2,400 years ago, somewhere around then. They consider him to also, so some people consider him to be extraordinary, right? So like he claimed that he was able to see his previous lives in reincarnation. He claimed that we as people will be reincarnated based on the actions and the quality of our life in this life, whether into a bug or into another human or something like that, depending on how well and how kind we were in this life and all the karma that we earned and all that stuff. But there's this movement of secular Buddhism where people think he's just like this great philosopher, and they say, yeah, he says some things that are supernatural, but we're not going to take him at his word of those because he has been proven right in these other things. The big buzz one now is meditation, right? And they have like scientific evidence that people during meditation are much calmer. They're able to reduce their anxiety dramatically. It's helpful with all this other stuff. And I can go on meditation for tons of times. I've studied it for the last 4 or 5 years, pretty intently. But so I don't want to keep it all as superficial as just calming you, because that's kind of one way our culture has taken it as like, oh, you can have as crazy as a life you want, but if you meditate, it's going to be okay. And it's like that's a BS way to take it. There's so much more than just meditation. But even he, this renowned philosopher, if you'll at least grant me that much, said that reincarnation is real, it's true, and the purpose of life is to live the best quality of life so that you are actually not reborn, and that being reborn, reincarnated, is actually a bad thing. The cycle of samsara is what it's called, and that's actually not a good thing. So continuing to be born, continuing to suffer lifetime after lifetime is not the goal. The goal is to actually cease one day and then never be born again. And I thought that's like just completely contrary to how we feel as humans. Like we don't want to die. We think living is the good thing. And the Buddha is saying, no, that's absolutely not it. Like the point is to not be born again. Although reincarnation is a thing if your quality of life was not high enough to attain full enlightenment to where you reach nirvana and you're not born again. So, but again, that could be a whole nother podcast. It's something I've studied a long time, but I just wanted to make that point. I'd be remiss if I didn't.
Mm-hmm. So is the whole point? Sorry, no.
Go ahead. No.
Is that in relation to the infinite time universe point?
No. So, I wanted to make that because I know we had beliefs in religion, and since it was on there, I just wanted to talk about that real quick. But the infinite time thing is actually, in my opinion, evident, and it says infinite time universe. Really, it probably should have. I should have put finite time, finite universe, in that it's a huge argument against reincarnation. So say you believe in reincarnation, all the science today tells us that time will be finite, and even the atoms in the universe will eventually be finite, and we're talking trillions of years from now. But at some point, every single molecule, every single atom, every single everything will be just split apart over time and decay and all this stuff. And I'm going to piss off a ton of scientists by not explaining this correctly. But just in our own world, if we believe that the solar system, our own solar system, is the only thing that exists, well, we all know confidently, or scientists know pretty confidently, that in a few billion years, the sun's going to expand so much that it's going to envelop the Earth. The Earth will cease to be livable because it's going to be inside the sun, and everything will be evaporated with the next amount, right?
Livable way before that, bro.
So with that being said, like, where would you be born again? Unless you believe that you could be born again on another planet, reincarnation can cease to exist. Now that's on a much smaller scale than really what I'm talking about is galaxies colliding and then separating, and then ultimately, like I said, the pull apart of every single atom, and everything is expected sometime in the trillions and trillions of trillions of years, where all energy is spent and turned into dark matter where it doesn't exist, because you can never destroy or create energy, right? But it can only like be transferred, but at some point it doesn't. I know I'm getting way into the weeds here.
Yeah.
But the point is, at some point there would be no physical place to live. How can someone be reincarnated if there is a finite time and a finite universe that will cease to exist in the future according to science? And I just wanted to make that point. It just seems bizarre. Like, did they not plan for that? If reincarnation?
The way I always saw the universe, and maybe this is just out of ignorance, somebody, as you said, smarter than me can contradict me, but I always felt like everything is cyclical, right? So if we say we started with the Big Bang, and that's where it started, and the universe is expanding. We're currently in a state of expansion. To your point, eventually, my thought was that eventually it would collapse, the expansion would halt, and then it would retract back into an initial point, in which case another Big Bang would occur, and we would cycle again. And so I guess the counter argument to that is that if all things are cyclical, like, I mean, it kind of gets into another interesting conversation about the origin of the universe, and what caused the Big Bang. Was the Big Bang really the first Big Bang, or was it a Big Bang in which there are many? But if you believe that, and even, okay, let's say it doesn't retract like that. Let's say, like, to your point, like everything turns to dark matter and there's nothing. Eventually, one would expect, if a Big Bang happened once, it can happen again. And if it does, life can generate again. And so perhaps there would just be some waiting periods where you don't have anywhere to reincarnate. But eventually you would assume that given enough time and the infinite nature of of time that life would reassert itself somewhere, and that spirits could be once again reborn. I think would be the answer to that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and maybe me proclaiming the leading theory was probably not the best way to describe it. It's just a new theory that I heard, because the other theory you're talking about is, I think they call it the big crunch. And so it's like you said, it expands completely, and then you have the big crunch, and then you got the big bang again, and then it's cyclical, right? It keeps bouncing back and forth. The one I was talking about, if I could find it here, maybe it's this one, big freeze or heat death, where basically all energy is completely exhausted till where every single thing in the entire universe reaches absolute zero, and there's virtually no possible way for any existence at all whatsoever. Like molecules even don't exist and all this stuff. It just gets crazy.
But again, even if you take that view, like presumably that's what the universe was like before the Big Bang.
Yeah.
So like, what caused the Big Bang? Like, and why couldn't that happen again? Like, without knowing the true mechanics of it, it's impossible to say. But
yeah, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Sorry, go ahead, Chai.
Well, it's interesting. Like, I mean, Van, what you were describing is, I think, exactly how I view the universe. And I think I remember when I first heard the second law of thermodynamics and discovered like the law of entropy and that idea of like the loss of energy, like, and everything.
Right.
Like that's just the nature of the universe. Is like energy is lost. Like there's just like the universe is in a constant state of decay, basically. And so like I guess I've always thought that there would be an end of all things, right? Like that's scientifically looking at the world, like that's just the direction we're going. And so that's a good question.
But all this tying back to reincarnation is just, if there's no livable place, like how what are you reincarnated to? And so that's kind of like the argument against.
And if you go off this idea of samsara, like, would the whole point be to try to like finish the cycle of reincarnation before this universe dies out? Like, is it almost like a race between like human perfection and, or like not even human perfection, but like sentient perfection or whatever you'd call that, versus like biological erosion? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It gets back a little bit to what we talked about in our other afterlife pod, which is the frustrating thing about being alive is that, like, in our lifetimes, we'll never get the answer to those questions, right? Like, we'll never know, most likely, unless there's some kind of scientific breakthroughs that far surpass what we've accomplished in human history so far. We will probably die not knowing for sure what the true nature of the universe and reality is, and like what caused the Big Bang and what will happen millions and millions of years in the future. Like, which of those theories is actually true? We'll probably never know. And like, if I had a wish, it would be that when I die, that you would gain a godlike omniscience. Is like, it would be to be able to know. Like, I wish I could know the answers to these questions, because I think they're so intriguing, and it makes me kind of mad that, like, I know I'm probably gonna die not knowing the answers, and that's sad. For a while, I thought that was going to motivate me to do something useful with my life, like try to find the answers to those questions. But then I started playing Final Fantasy 11, and it's just like, I got better things to do.
Find the fountain of youth. You're like, I must live forever to know the answers. I have a proposal to make, and I don't know if I've ever live proposed the following podcast topic, but I feel like it'd be very interesting to talk about immortality in our next podcast, because I think that would relate to a lot of what we're talking about. Because like, even as we're talking, I've been thinking about, like, because that's the flip side, right? Like, as you just said, Van, or like Smiley, like Smiley, sorry, one of your biggest frustrations is that you won't live to know the answers. Well, the answer to that is figuring out how to live forever, right? And that is kind of the human condition to a certain, like, in some people, right? Whether they're adventurers, whether they're scientists, like trying to figure out how does man live forever? How do we live long enough to know all the answers or learn all the things? I think I don't know. I feel like it would play interestingly with the idea of reincarnation, which is totally against that, right? It's like, no, you have a finite amount of time, then you come back.
Well, I mean, the traditional Buddhist reincarnation, like the idea that you're trying to get to the point where you're no longer reincarnated. But in a way, reincarnation is just a different repackaging of the idea of spiritual immortality, that your spirit never dies. You always will come back as something else, and that, like, the you who is you does live forever across multiple lifetimes and multiple bodies. So they're definitely very tightly related. I'd be interested in that. I think I definitely have some thoughts on immortality. I think it's despite what I just said, more than it's cracked up to be. So I think it's but you know what? We'll save it for the pod.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Instead of talking about it on the pod? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, but this is a different pod.
Save it for
It's a reincarnation
Save for the next pod.
You save for the next pod.
Van, I'd like to ask you a question because you probably have a better idea of this than I do. But I feel like one of my biggest concern. I think maybe one of the reasons why I've often most discounted reincarnation is I'm like I don't remember being someone else.
Yeah.
I don't have that memory, and I think you kind of spoke to that as well as like the fact that you're just like, well, I must be the first iteration of my soul, or like I have to imagine that most traditional views of reincarnation must be based off some idea that the present state of the soul has like there's like a limitation, they can't remember a previous iteration, because I feel like if they could, correct. I mean, and maybe I don't know, wouldn't ever be like, oh yeah, I remember being a squirrel, I remember being like a rich man or something. Like does that feel like it's a tenet of that kind of belief, of a traditional belief in reincarnation, like religiously? Or
so I think we're all to assume that we have all, if you believe in reincarnation, you are also to accept the idea that you have lived multiple times before, you just can't recall those lives. And the Buddha even said so. I can't remember how many generations he said he had remembered once becoming enlightened. He actually said, I remembered my past lives, I remembered all of this. So, and I guess maybe that's probably the crux of where he began his thing. Reincarnation has to be a thing because I can remember my previous lives, so therefore we will continue to have lives. Well, but he became enlightened and of course didn't get reborn since he was enlightened. So I think if you are to believe in reincarnation, it would probably not be smart of you to think that this is your first iteration of your life. Just know that you cannot remember your previous lives. Now this comes into really a perfect segue into some of the strongest evidence for. There have been many case studies of children having nightmares of previous lives that are actually being investigated by some really top scientists in their field in universities. And like the studies are still ongoing right now. With the advent of the internet, information could travel a lot faster and all that stuff. And some people they're literally studying right now as they go to people's houses and they try to gather information about things and then dig into the stories. And some of them are not just things that are public knowledge, like some of the names they proclaim to be and places they proclaim to be are not public knowledge. And through investigation, you find out that, oh shit, this person said he was this name. That name did exist. And like one of the ones that I remember is a pilot from World War II or something like that. And the kid at like 5 years old was rattling off the aircraft carrier name, like in his dream, like, oh, I was on this aircraft carrier, blah, blah, talking to his mom or dad about his nightmare that he had. And I was on this aircraft carrier. My name was James and all this other stuff. And again, it's not like public knowledge. It's not written heavily in books. There's no movies about this individual. But then as the researchers start doing their work, sure enough, there was like one pilot at this crazy outpost on this decommissioned aircraft carrier that nobody even knew about with this exact name that this kid claimed to be before the scientists came on there. So like, I'm sure you can come up with an explanation for it. We've seen grander things in magicians and all that crap. So I'm sure there's a way you could fake that. But some of the arguments, if you can suspend your, criticism or whatever, disbelief, it seems pretty impressive, pretty mind-boggling. The other thing is like kids will claim to be somebody who was murdered when they were young or something like that, and they'll say where they were. So the scientist will go up and he'll gather photos of the park off the internet, the house where that person was said to have lived, picture of their mom that he scoured somewhere in microfiche or whatever, and then he'll go to the kid, right, who's sitting there saying that he was this person, and he'll hold up two photos and he'll be like, hey, was this your mom or is this your mom? And the kid will, that was my mom. Well, sure enough, that was the mom of the person you're claiming to be. Was this your house or was this your house? And it's like, oh, well, that was my house. That's the house that I saw in my dream. Okay, well, this is the house where that person lived, you claim to be, and so on, the park and so on and all that stuff. So there's like strong evidence out there, strong cases out there of people who shouldn't be able to be taught this much or coached this much by parents or anything like that, just being accurate so many times to where you kind of have to believe it or figure something else is going on that's equally fascinating. So there is evidence out there of cases like that happening.
I had an idea one time, and I don't know if I read this somewhere. If I do, I don't know who to credit, so I'm sorry. Or if it's just something that I was thinking about. But I always wondered, like, what if you do remember your past life when you're born, or like before you're born? but then you spend 9 months developing,
right,
and like it like kind of bleeds out of you during that time, where like you like now you've lost everything, and like by the time you're born and go through the traumatic experience of birth, and then go through enough development to learn to talk and do all these things, like you're learning all your new things, that it basically has just pushed it all out of you. And by the
yeah,
time you're like, and so like maybe like you said, like the support for that would be maybe when you're a young child, some of the vestiges of those memories are still there. They kind of
yeah,
can permeate in your subconscious and dreams, but like by the time you're old enough to even know what a previous life was, you've forgotten everything. And like
yeah,
the reason that resonates with me is that like I think about my own life, and like how much of my life do I remember? Like even my young
yeah.
years, I have
Good point.
flashes, I have small things. I can't tell you what things were like for me even when I was like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. I just very specific
Hmm.
events that stand out. So much of that is erased. And like, why wouldn't, you know, you forget those things, even if you assume memory is tied to spirit, which is what you're saying is, you're assuming that if your spirit is reborn,
Hmm.
that your memory is tied to that and not stored in the hard drive up here.
Right.
uh, like that's the other thing, is like, why would you remember your past lives if your memories are stored in a different body? It's like, it, I think you could have an interesting concepts about computers too, like if you take certain parts from one computer
Right.
to another, how much is it the same computer? Like, does the heart, like,
Yeah.
comparing humans and people to computers and technology is also a very fascinating thought
We'll probably do
experiment.
that on the next podcast because I'm sure that'll come
Probably
up
not the
during
next one.
immortality.
Oh, maybe
Yeah,
it
I know
will.
that can tie a
Maybe
little
it
bit.
I
will.
bet it would.
Yeah,
I
that's a
think
good point.
I think Van, what you're talking about, and this is, I don't know, I feel like we're getting so much of, like, we've been doing like these kind of like supernatural podcasts that kind of examine the supernatural, whether it's afterlife or just
Mhm.
reincarnation, maybe even immortality might dig into it. I think like that would make its own interesting podcast topic, would be just like supernatural things in the world, because like what you're talking about, like these kids having these experiences, like you can't really explain that, right? And there's like
Right.
stuff like that happens all the time. Like, I don't know, if there's any reason that leads me to have faith in something more than just what we see, it's just like the weird shit that happens in the world. Because I know a ton of people who've experienced really weird things that are practically unexplainable, and like stuff like you're talking about kids having nightmares that relate to real events. It just feels like there is like something beneath the surface, right? And we just don't really know what it is. But
yeah, and like, this will be my final thought. So don't ask me about my final thoughts, Smiley, because then you're gonna put me on the spot. I won't have anything to say.
I was gonna say we're past final thought time, so because
Well,
I knew we weren't going to be able to fill enough time
have
on this
so
topic,
much more to
so
say.
now we're doing 2 podcasts on it. Like,
hey,
one day maybe you'll be right about that, but I'm not going to
my
hold
final
my
thought is this: like, out of all those instances, 4, right, with all the memories, all the thousands and thousands of statements and all those things, like, only one has to be right for it to be true. Like, not all thousands of those reoccurrence or occurrences have to be right. Like, only one, and that's a pretty encouraging thought, if you will.
Yeah, that is an encouraging thought. All right, well, we're going to put a pin in it for now, but maybe we'll come back next week and talk about immortality and get to touch on some of these similar topics if you guys had more to say about reincarnation in specific. Since we haven't really decided about the contact info, I'm going to give you the abbreviated version. You can find us in a lot of places. Obviously, if you're watching us now, you've found us somewhere. But the best way to get a hold of us at the Focus Target Podcast is via email, focustargetpodcast@gmail.com. Honestly, that's the best way. All the other stuff you can figure out, probably Twitch, YouTube, you know where to find us. So thanks for being here with us. Episode 115 of the Focus Target Podcast. Maybe one day our podcast will be reincarnated into something different. Who knows? That might be fun. But we'll see you next time. Thanks for being here. This is your host, Smiley. Captain Smiley.
This is Shy.
I'm bad. As always, cover us, Porkins. We're out.
Go Avs.